I think every presentation starts with, okay, we're recording.
Okay,
That's good.
Recording?
Good set?
Set?
Okay.
Okay, cool.
Thanks.
So yeah, we're coming to take pictures, so it's not just this
No, you're not.
Yeah, I know. It's the,
How's everybody doing?
Excellent.
Yeah, last session of the day. You guys still doing all right? You got the coffee to wake you all back up? Second last.
yeah, there's the closing remarks and
Oh, yeah.
presentation.
Okay, so, you guys shouldn't be drained too much yet. So, hope you guys have been enjoying the presentation so far. I'm going to be touching on a few topics here that have kind of been approached tangentially from other presentations. Tiffany mentioned a lot about Bootstrap and accessibility, so obviously we're going to be talking about some of that today. Vue.js has been mentioned in some presentations. Luke had a presentation about decoupling Drupal. He talked about GraphQL. We're not going to go into GraphQL in this presentation, but I will talk a bit about how to decouple Drupal and how to build kind of a headless CMS out of Drupal 8. Show of hands, how many people have worked with Drupal 8 here? Fair number. How many people work with Drupal 8.1, 8.0?
I told you to do that.
Yeah. So, anyways, Drupal 8 now is getting quite nice, quite stable. I highly recommend using it. It's very powerful. It's at that point where there's enough third-party module support, third module support to actually build functional sites out of it. Apparently that might not have been the case in the earlier versions of Drupal 8. So a lot of those kinks have been ironed out. Go check it out. It's great for building kind of API type applications, which I love doing. I love APIs for integrating systems together, which is why I had a lot of fun with this project. But basically what we're going to go through is talk a bit about Vue.js as a front end with Bootstrap, Drupal 8 as your back end CMS, how we got it all to tie together to bring you the DrupalCamp Ottawa website, which you've probably all seen and used. You can bring it up for reference so during the presentation. Some fun. But let's jump right into it. So, I'm going to tell you guys about how Coldfront Labs built the DrupalCamp Ottawa website this year and fell in love with Vue.js and Bootstrap as a front end. And how we're actually using that for a few other projects now. I'm going to start off with a few quotes. I'm not exactly sure who mentioned these. They're just kind of floating around on the interwebs. User interface is like a joke. If you have to explain it, it's not that great. Going back to this topic of accessibility and usability, right? If it's too complex, nobody's going to use it. Right? So we wanted to make sure the DrupalCamp Ottawa website was nice and simple, nice and usable. Another quote, first solve the problem, then write the code. This is something I'm guilty of as a developer. I think like a developer. When all you have is a hammer, all your problems look like nails. You might have heard that one. So it's easy to think of your goal, your target, what you want to achieve, and then your brain starts writing lines of code already. You're already getting ahead of yourself. First, solve the problem, right? So, what was the problem that we were trying to solve? Pretty simple. We wanted to create a compelling website for DrupalCamp Ottawa 2018. Had to look great, right? There had to be a focus on quick access to information. It had to be responsive, mobile first. That's how we build our applications. That's how we build our sites. Right? It's a tenet of ours. We absolutely believe in responsive. And then it had to be fast at everything, not just presenting the information to the user, but it had to be fast in terms of development. We were down to the wire. We needed a website for DrupalCamp. I'm not going to say how late we were to that point. We all got here. We're all here, right? We all got the info. You guys showed up in large numbers, by the way, so thank you so much for coming out. But yeah, we had to build it fast. So we couldn't wait on developers, drawing up the spec for the content, structure, we needed to get our designers working on implementing something and, put something up as fast as possible. It also needs to provide up-to-the-minute information for users. Case in point, this morning we had to change in rooms. We had to be able to easily go into that site, update some information, put in some new information, and have it available to you guys in a timely manner. That way you're not showing up at room G, whatever it was. Right? We all knew to come over to this other side. Oh yeah, and it also had to be, we had some content that we had to go put in there. It had to be nice and secure for them. And we wanted to be able to manage that content in a rational way, not have to reinvent the wheel in that sense. So what does this solution look like? We opted for a distributed approach. This is something that, like I said, with the advent of Drupal 8, is much easier now. There's a lot of tools at your disposal right in Drupal core to build decoupled applications, distributed applications. So we wanted a front-end layer that would be easy to prototype, easy to develop, quick, responsive, accessible, and then the back end we wanted we wanted Drupal, So we wanted to leverage the power of each of those pillars. And then we also wanted to make sure that our developers could focus on what they needed to do, and the designers could focus on what they needed to do. Nobody was really kind of waiting on each other in that sense. We could just kind of start hammering it out. So our front end, we knew we had to present some very public information. It had to be visually engaging, blazing fast. A lot of people are expecting application like and I mean phone app, right, where you tap on something, your information shows up. You're not waiting, you don't have a little spinner, right? People are moving away from that traditional website paradigm, more into just, I'm using an application. Our back end had to be robust in terms of content management, user management, role management, and we had to make sure it exposed everything we needed using REST format. So REST is, just a very useful lightweight standard for transporting data across the web. Drupal 8 built right in. So, on the front end, we've got Vue.js. Who here has worked with Vue.js before? Okay, a few people. It's a very interesting framework. It's obviously JS based, but it kind of organizes your application in individual components, where those components define markup, they define behaviors, they define styles, and you can take those components and reuse them across different applications. And then it also includes a lot of kind of underlying frameworky stuff for making those components talk to each other. And it's modular, so we have options in terms of extending it. And yeah, so Vue.js also has a Bootstrap plugin. This Bootstrap plugin just provides some basic default Bootstrap components, Bootstrap markup themes, and then easily integratable in your Vue.js components. So we like the fact that it was reusable. We could take some of these components that we developed, use them in different applications, because we're going to be working with Drupal, with Vue.js. So as much as we can reuse in that sense, we wanted to make sure that that was something we could achieve. And running a lot of that in the browser, so Vue.js is fast. It's blazing fast. When you switch pages, it's all just kind of leveraging that power directly within the browser rather than waiting on the server side. So our Drupal 8 backend, we knew we needed something robust. Like I said, those events, content management tools, content authoring, managing your content types, all those relationships. We needed to make sure it provided RESTful web interface, so endpoints for content, various modules that would support that. And like I mentioned, the earlier versions of Drupal 8, maybe not so much on this side, but reliable, tested, right? Secure. We knew we had that with Drupal 8. So let's look at how we put it all together. Starting with our first iteration. I'm just going to go through some screenshots. I'm not going to do live web page because these are screenshots of the application as it was throughout development. So this was our first iteration. We needed something up, like I said, really fast just to get information out there. So this was a static site. We just had the info, the date, a few basic links for some forums, and just, planting those seeds for DrupalCamp. As you can see, it was pretty bare. We had space for sponsors. People knew that they could sponsor, but we didn't really have anything yet. Right, so we had something up. That was good enough, all right? Now, this is just a little screenshot of the Vue Js Components that were in use. The things to note here are more importantly is that components folder. We've got 3. That's it. Nice and simple. App.vue is kind of your main container, main.js. The rest is just kind of housekeeping stuff. You can ignore that bottom stuff. It's just framework stuff for Vue.js and Visual Studio Code. So it doesn't look too complicated, nice and easy. Got a few iterations later. So looking at version 1.5 now, not much has changed in terms of the front page. We have a few sponsors now. No more diamond sponsored, but hey, platinum, good enough. Now, the forms we were using, we didn't have our Drupal 8 backend ready, so we had some Google Forms in the meantime. So this was just kind of a data repository. We needed to capture that information, but we weren't ready to link it to any kind of dynamic distributed system. So we were just capturing that data using Google Forms. Good enough. If you look at the components, again, nothing much has changed on the front end, right? So still kind of nice and easy. So skipping ahead, quite a few versions, where we switched to Drupal-based forms. We also did a few more tweaks on the UI. So the layout's starting to come together. We've got this announcements section. And we have an API site, api.drupalcampottawa.com. So this is our Drupal 8. It's decoupled backend. It's not headless because we're still using the forms on the Drupal side. All right. But one thing I do want to call out is the fact that Drupal has a Bootstrap theme. I'm sure many of you have used it. Maybe some of you are curious about it now that you've heard the word Bootstrap thrown around a lot. So even though we didn't have that same system, we had those two systems in place, they were both using Bootstrap components. So there was some semblance of synergy between those two. I hate that word though. But yeah, common look and feel, right? Your users aren't being thrown into a very jarringly different experience. So there's the advantage of having that common UI presentation framework in Bootstrap. So now we're capturing all this data in Drupal, right? Now we've got power. And we can see that our Vue Js components are starting to get a little bit more complex. So we've added some components, and you can see there are some extra JavaScript files for some service requests. So we're starting to talk to Drupal as well. All right, let's keep going. We're going to make stuff pretty now. A bit more focus on the styling on the front end. Still some content missing, but we've got a schedule now. Just a basic, nothing in terms of sessions, but just a little overview of how the day is going to go. So far, it looks pretty accurate. Hasn't changed too much. And then once again, the Vue.js side, we iterated, we added what we needed. We were able to add some new functionality, but the complexity of that front end didn't increase too much. All right, skipping ahead quite a bit again, 1.27. We're starting to use data from Drupal to display on the site. So now the schedule information, we're actually pulling that from Drupal. So behind the scenes, we've got some JavaScript calls that are talking to Drupal 8 using that JSON API, requesting those specific schedule items, and then we're rendering those, we're choosing how to display those on the front end. So all we need to do on the Drupal backend is make sure those are available. We've captured the data. That's all good. We don't need to spend a lot of time theming Drupal or developing any kind of pages on the Drupal site. And so all the information that you're getting on the Vue.js main site is coming from Drupal, including all the session presentations, the descriptions. All right. And I don't know if you guys can see this code too much. There's nothing too intense going on, but you can see that now these services, now that we're integrating with the Drupal site, we've got quite a few more JavaScript libraries to do that integration. Now don't let the amount of files fool you. They're pretty tiny, right? We're using this Axios library. Axios is just basic HTTP requests in Vue.js. Pointed to your URL, set up some headers, and then go and request some data. Now, this is where we start talking to Drupal. Right? We're getting these sessions. Right? We're just calling our really basic API. Get nodes, node type, with filters, and these are filters. These are query parameters that that are supported by the JSON API in Drupal 8. So there's nothing kind of right now. We're all out of the box. Although maybe we're using the dev version of JSON API. Yeah. The first version of JSON API was missing maybe a few things. There's a dev version, 2.x of the JSON API, which has a whole lot more. So you're probably using that one there. Very similar though. Just kind of core. JSON API is not in core. No.
The plan is pretty good.
Yeah. All right. So we made it. So now let's break on through to the Drupal side. What do we have on the Drupal side? How do we set that up? Honestly, there was not a whole lot of work that went into it. I'm sure you've all you've all authored some content forms. You've defined content types. You've written views. I don't know if we even have any crazy views going on for any of this. It's all just content types, content forms, and storage. And then the two key parts. Well, the key part for this one, but I would say the two key parts for any decoupled or headless Drupal 8 installation would be the JSON API module and also the RESTful web services module and views. So just to give you an idea, JSON API, it'll expose all your content types. You can request nodes, taxonomy terms. You can request relationships. It spits back an array of data that, actually, let me show you. So, if you hit api.drupalcampottawa.com/JSON-API, this is the kind of data you're going to get. A whole lot of links. So just hitting that root will let you know everything you can get from the JSON API currently on Drupal. So you can get the list of blocks, files, actions, all that stuff, nodes, node types. Right, so we've got these session nodes, we've got sponsor nodes. Okay, here we go. So it basically gives you everything you need to kind of drill down directly into the piece of content that you need. The RESTful web services module. That one I wanted to call it out, even though we didn't use it for this particular site, because it lets you take your views and expose them as a REST endpoint. That's powerful because then you can bring in content that might have complex relationships, and you might not want to bring in everything about that content and its related content. So it lets you basically focus your data, focus your view on just the fields that you want, build up all those relationships in the view itself, and then when you hit that endpoint, it exposes it all as JSON. So you can create your own endpoint. It doesn't have to follow the exact kind of API modeling structure that JSON API has, but you can still gather the information that you need. Okay, that all being said, that takes us to the site as it is today. You've witnessed a few updates going on. We might demo another one at the end of this presentation, so you can kind of see how that process goes. But there were a few things that we left out, either for time's sake or just because we didn't have enough experience with those technologies. One thing is that getting the user session integrated on the Vue.js side. You notice that if you're going to sign in, you have to go to the api.drupalcampottawa.com site, so it kicks you out of that front end into Drupal. And ideally, we would have your front end be just the only piece that you're interacting with. So we could define all those forms on the Drupal side. You would log in and authenticate against the Drupal site, but through the Vue.js front end. So that's something that we've actually been implementing in some other applications. There are some complexities around that, but again, because of the modular nature of Vue.js, these are the kinds of components that, as we're building out, we can reuse them in any other application. So logging onto a Drupal 8 site through a Vue.js front end, pretty common thing. We're for sure going to have to do that again. So we want to make sure that as we're developing these things, they're packaged in such a way that we can easily transfer them into another project or even contribute them back to the community as little modules that you guys can throw onto your Vue.js applications. Forms, like I said, if we could implement the forms on the Vue.js front end, that would have been even better, right? A more seamless experience for everybody, but due to time constraints, that wasn't the most important piece to look at for us. And in terms of the integration between the Vue.js front end and our Drupal 8 system, there is a library called Devour, which is a generic JSON API, well, generic to JSON API. It's not Drupal specific, but it is specific to the JSON API spec. And it allows you to define your data model and then query your JSON API endpoint and get back only the information that you need. So it won't get all those extra fields associated to nodes. If you tell it, I just need the title and the body, that's all you'll get. So it's easier to parse that information when you get it into your application, but it also does a lot of fun stuff with regards to relationships. So you can easily say, I want to bring in this type of node, but I also want to bring in the taxonomy term that it's tagged with, and I want to get the title and an image field from that taxonomy term. So rather than having to kind of manually drill into your JSON API requests, the Devour library will take care of that. You just define your data model, you tell it what relationships it has with those various data elements, and then Devour takes care of just following all those links that the JSON API gives you, and then just pulls what you've asked from it, and then gives you a nice, clean-looking JSON data container that you can use in your application. So, again, that's one thing that we're looking at for other projects. Didn't have a chance to include it into this site. But, the scope of this site was such that once we've got our sessions and our sponsors and our presentations, like the relationships weren't too complex. So the effort to implement the devour library in this case would have been proportionally high. So that's the story of the DrupalCamp Ottawa website for 2018 and how we've used Vue.js and Bootstrap. And yeah, hope you enjoyed. If you have any questions, feel free to ask. Yeah?
You quickly mentioned the complexity of authentication. Can you elaborate a little bit more on that?
Right. So authentication, there are a few things. First, the JSON API doesn't have a built-in way to authenticate. So when you're querying the JSON API, it's querying as, anonymous. However, if you are logged in and have a session cookie, and then you send that along with your request to the JSON API, then the permissions kick in, right? So you need to first get that session authentication cookie, and then make sure that cookie is being injected into your requests. What you can do so we were using the Axios library. Axios has tough cookie jar support module that you can extend it with, and then you can post the login form. It sends you back the cookie, and then using that Axios cookie jar support, it sets up a cookie jar. Any subsequent requests will be made with that authentication cookie. One weird thing, going back to the JSON API module versions, version 1, there was no JSON API path to the user object, the authenticated user object. Yeah, to the me. You could query users. Do you happen to memorize your user UUID? Probably not, right? So we needed a way to, you need a way to find out just which user you are and then make that specific request. JSON API 2.0, or 2.x, sorry, I don't think there's a released version of it yet. There's actually a meta link to get your own user. So it's just JSON API/user. And then as long as you're authenticated, it sends back your user. So, those are the things to consider.
And just like you've used the kind of the Drupal rendering for the form, can you add the user login through the normal user form, and then he just has his cookie, and when you request to the application?
So that depends on your browser. There are some browsers that don't really like to share cookies between session tabs.
Can't you tag the cookie with multiple domains?
Yeah.
Subdomain.
Yeah, so you need to start setting up your cookie to actually support those domains.
And then you record requests to make sure that
Yeah, that's right.